So today, we're going to dive into two totally clashing philosophies for building software, Agile versus Waterfall. Really, it's a story of rigid, upfront plans versus flexible human collaboration and how picking the right approach can be the difference between success and, well, failure. Let's kick things off with the one question that honestly started a revolution in the software world. Back in the late 60s, as software projects got more and more complex, engineers started asking, hey, why can't building software be predictable like building a bridge? And that one question, it kicked off this huge quest to bring order to the beautiful, creative chaos of writing code. And this is what gave birth to the plan and document approach, which you probably know as the waterfall model. And the promise? Oh, it was totally irresistible. Just draft a perfect plan, execute it flawlessly, and voila, you deliver a perfect product.
Simple, right?
And yeah, the process is every bit as rigid as it sounds. First, you create this massive, exhaustive plan. Then you write comprehensive documentation for literally every single detail. Only after all that is done can you start coding. And then, at the very end, you have a final testing phase. Each step has to be 100% complete before you move to the next. There's absolutely no going back. Now, to be fair, in some really high-stakes projects, this super rigid approach, it actually worked wonders. Take this space shuttle's software. It had less than one bug for every 420,000 lines of code. I mean, that is just a stunning feat of engineering. But that kind of perfection came with a huge price tag. For every 6,000 lines of code they wrote, the team had to produce 2,500 pages of documentation. The amount of overhead was just insane. It made you wonder, could a model like this ever really work in the fast-paced world of commercial software? For most projects, the answer was a big, resounding no. When this model was applied to commercial projects, its promise of predictability just crashed head-on into reality, leading to what a lot of people now call its great fall.
And look, the numbers here, they really tell the story. One analysis looked at just 31 major waterfall projects and found, wait for it, $17 billion in documented losses. This pointed to a deep, systemic problem with the whole approach.
And the success rate? It was just as bad. A study of 500 new development projects found that only three were completed on time and on budget. Yeah, you heard that right. Just 3. The very model that promised predictability was failing, and it was failing spectacularly. You know, there's this quote from a frustrated customer that just sums it all up perfectly. They said, "It's just what we asked for, but not what we want." And that's the fatal flaw, right there. By the time the perfectly planned project was finally delivered, the customer's needs had completely changed. And this really gets to the core of the problem. You see, the greatest strength of software is its flexibility. Unlike a bridge, you can change it, you can improve it, you can adapt it. By treating software like it was set in concrete and locking it into this rigid plan from day one, the waterfall model was stripping away its most valuable asset. So, out of the wreckage of all these failed projects, a totally new philosophy started to emerge. And it wasn't just a new process, it was a full-on rebellion against the old way of doing things. It was called Agile. Now, this change didn't just happen overnight. You had waterfall dominating since the 60s, then the 80s brought the spiral model, which kind of started to introduce early ideas like customer feedback. But the real turning point, the big moment, was in 2001 with the Agile Manifesto. It was basically born from the shared frustration of a group of developers who just tired of failing. The manifesto laid out 4 core values that completely flipped the old model on its head. It prioritized individuals and their interactions because rigid processes were just killing creativity. It valued working software over documentation because, let's be honest, teams were spending more time writing about the software than actually writing the software. It championed customer collaboration because rigid contracts were creating this us versus them mentality. And most importantly, it valued responding to change over following a plan, because blindly following an outdated plan was the root of all this failure.
Okay, so that's the philosophy, but what does this actually look like in practice? Let's break down how the Agile development cycle really works.
Well, the beating heart of Agile is something called an iteration. Think of it as a short, repeatable cycle, usually just 1 or 2 weeks long, where the team produces a small, working, testable piece of the software. The whole point is to get constant feedback and make course corrections along the way, making sure the project actually stays on track and delivers what the customer really needs. Now, for Agile to work, it relies on some key practices.
Test-driven development, or TDD, is brilliant. It basically bakes quality in from the start by having developers write the test before they even write the code. User stories keep everyone focused on what the customer is actually trying to do, not just some random list of features. And velocity helps teams measure how much work they can realistically get done so they can make real forecasts instead of impossible promises.
So it's really tempting to just say, okay, waterfall's bad, Agile is good, right? But the truth is, it's a bit more nuanced than that. They're different tools for different jobs, and the real key is knowing which one to pick. So when should you build a bridge? Well, a waterfall approach might be your best bet if you absolutely need a super detailed specification up front, maybe for legal reasons. Or what if your customers just aren't available for constant feedback? For truly massive, complex systems, or for teams that are spread all over the globe, that rigid structure can actually be a huge advantage.
So it all comes down to this. Waterfall is like building a bridge. You need that perfect, detailed blueprint before you ever lay the first stone. Agile, on the other hand, is more like tending a garden. You plant a seed, you nurture it, you react to the weather, and you adapt as it grows. So for your next project, you have to ask yourself, are you building a bridge or are you tending a garden?